There is an old saying. It is more than 500 years old. It was spoken in a language that almost no one speaks today, in a city that no longer exists, by a people whose libraries were burned. The saying is short. Tlalahui, Tlapetskahui in Tlaltikpak. It is slippery, it is slick, on the earth. That sentence is not a complaint about the weather. It is a philosophical claim about the nature of human existence. And the people who said it, the Nahua, the people we usually call the Aztecs, built an entire moral system on top of it. Their idea was this: the earth is not a stable place. Life is not solid ground. You are not walking on flat stone. You are walking, every single one of you, every single day, along a narrow path slick with mud. And the question that defines what it means to be human is not, how do I avoid falling? Because you cannot avoid falling. The question is, how do I keep my footing on slippery ground? For a long time, the world dismissed the Aztecs as warriors, as builders of pyramids, as a people known for ritual and conquest. We were taught about their gods, their calendar, their fall. We were rarely taught about their philosophers. And yet they had philosophers. They called them Tlamatinime, the knowers of things. And these thinkers had spent generations doing exactly what Socrates did in Athens and the Buddha did under his tree. They were asking the oldest question there is: how should a human being live? Today we are going to listen to their answer, and I think you will find it is one of the most quietly powerful answers anyone has ever given. Let me be honest about what we are working with. When the Spanish arrived in what is now Mexico in 1519, they encountered a civilization at its height. Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, was a city of perhaps 200,000 people, built on a lake, with causeways and aqueducts and floating gardens. By European standards of the day, it was vast, clean, and astonishing. Within 2 years, it was destroyed. The conquest did not only kill people, it killed books. The Spanish burned the codices, the painted manuscripts in which the Nahua recorded their history, their religion, and their thought. Most of what those books contained is gone forever. What survives reaches us through 3 narrow channels: a handful of pre-conquest codices that escaped the fires, the work of friars who, after the conquest, recorded Nahua oral traditions, most famously Bernardino de Sahagún, whose Florentine codex preserves enormous amounts of indigenous thought, even as it was filtered through Christian eyes. And the Huehuetlatoli, the ancient words, speeches of moral instruction passed from elders to the young, preserved in writing after the conquest. From these fragments, modern scholars, most notably Miguel León Portilla in the 20th century and James Maffei in our own time, have reconstructed something extraordinary: a coherent, sophisticated philosophical tradition, not a religion, not a mythology, a philosophy with its own metaphysics, its own ethics, its own theory of truth. That is what we are exploring today, and the path will go like this. First, we will meet the Tlamatinime, who they were and what kind of question they thought philosophy was for. Then we will encounter the strangest and most important word in their vocabulary, Teotl, the engine of their entire universe. From there, we will descend into the slippery earth itself, the central image of their ethics. We will meet Neltiliztli, their word for truth, which is not what you think truth is. We will meet Nezahualcoyotl, the philosopher-king who wrote poems about the fleeting nature of everything beautiful. And finally, we will ask what this lost civilization, speaking from across 5 centuries of silence, has to say to us. to you watching this right now. Let's begin with the people who started asking the questions. In Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs, there is a word, Tlamatini. The plural is Tlamatinime. It is usually translated as sage or wise one, or, more literally, one who knows things. But the Tlamatinime were not priests exactly. They were not generals. They were a class of educated thinkers, teachers in the elite schools called the Kalmakak, where the children of nobility and the most promising of the commoners were trained. They studied astronomy and the calendar. They composed poetry. They debated ethics. They asked in formal terms the kind of questions a Greek would have recognized instantly as philosophy. What is real? What is true? What is the good life? Why are we here? The historian Miguel León Portilla, in his landmark 1956 book, La Filosofía Nahuatl, translated into English as Aztec Thought and Culture, was the first major modern scholar to argue in detail that the Tlamatinime deserved the name philosopher. Until then, much of the Western Academy treated Aztec thought as mere myth or religion. León Portilla, working from surviving Nahuatl poems and the Huehuetl-Atolli, showed something different. He showed that the Tlamatinime had wrestled with questions of being, of truth, of human flourishing, in ways that paralleled and sometimes anticipated the great traditions of Eurasia. Decades later, the American philosopher James Maffei extended this work. In his 2014 book, Aztec Philosophy, Understanding a World in Motion, Maffei argued that the Tlamatinime did not merely have stray philosophical insights. They had a coherent, systematic metaphysics, a worldview that hung together as carefully as anything in the Western canon. So who were they? They were, in Maffei's reading, philosophers in the deepest and most practical sense, not philosophers of the seminar room, philosophers of how to live. Their question was not abstract, it was urgent. It was, in fact, the question we began with. How does one keep one's footing on slippery ground? And to understand their answer, we have to understand the strange and beautiful thing they believed the universe was made of. Imagine for a moment that everything that exists, every stone, every river, every star, every thought in your head, every god in the sky, is not a separate thing. Imagine that all of it is, instead, a single vast sacred energy, constantly moving, constantly transforming, taking on different shapes the way water takes the shape of whatever it flows into. That energy has a name in Nahuatl, Teotl. Now, be careful here. Older translations rendered Teotl as God. That is misleading. Teotl is not a deity. Teotl is not a being who lives in the sky. According to Maffei's influential reading, Teotl is closer to a principle, a sacred power that constitutes the entire cosmos. Everything that exists is Teotl taking some particular shape, some particular dance, some particular face, for some particular moment. The many gods of the Aztec pantheon, Quetzalcoatl, Tezcatlipoca, Huitzilopochtli, and the rest, are, in this reading, not separate beings. They are masks of Teotl, different aspects of the one sacred energy, presenting different faces of itself. Now I should pause here because this is contested. Some scholars argue Maffei has over-systematized this, that his Teotl as energy reading sounds to some critics suspiciously close to modern Western spiritual concepts and may not be quite what the Nahua themselves had in mind. There is genuine academic debate about how monistic Aztec metaphysics really was, and whether the impersonal energy reading captures the texture of Nahua religious experience. I want you to know that debate exists. But what is widely agreed is this. The Nahua saw reality not as a collection of stable things, but as a process, a motion, a weaving. Maffei's subtitle is exact, a world in motion. Reality for the Tlamatinime was not built out of solid blocks. It was woven, continuously, out of opposing forces, life and death, light and dark, male and female, order and chaos, held together in an endless dance. That dance is not always gentle. The Nahua observed that the universe is full of opposition, tension, and reversal. Day becomes night. The young become old. The empire rises and falls. Nothing solid stays solid. And this is the philosophical move. They did not see this instability as a problem to be solved. They saw it as the basic fact of what reality is. The universe is not a building. The universe is a weaving, and every thread in it, including you, is being pulled. If the universe is a weaving in motion, what does that mean for the creatures who live inside it? For us, the small, breakable things perched on the surface of this restless cosmos. It means we are standing on the slippery earth. The word in Nahuatl is Tlaltikpak. It is usually translated blandly as on the earth, but the literal meaning is more vivid. Scholars point out that Tlaltikpak can be rendered as on the point or on the summit of the earth, suggesting a narrow, jagged surface, a peak, a ridge, a place where there is not much room to stand and where there is a long way to fall on either side. That is the picture. That is where the Nahua thought human beings were living, not on a wide, stable plain, on the edge of something. And then the proverb, Tla'alawi, Tlapetskawi in Tlaltikpak. It is slippery, it is slick, on the earth. Fray Bernardino de Sahagún, the Spanish friar who recorded so much Nahua moral teaching, captured how this saying was used. It was said of a person who had lived an upright life and then fell. Perhaps at one time, one was of good life. Later, he fell into some wrong, as if he had slipped in the mud. That is the image. A person walking carefully, even well, and then a moment, a wrong step, a slick patch, and they are down. Now hear the philosophical force of this. The Nahua did not believe that good people were immune to moral failure. They did not believe that virtue, once achieved, was a fortress. They did not believe, and this is the part that should land, that anyone could live a life of unblemished goodness. This is, in some ways, the opposite of certain strands of Western moral thinking. In a great deal of European ethics, the saint is a goal, an actually reachable state of moral perfection. Many religious traditions hold up figures who, supposedly, never sinned, never erred, never lost their balance. The implicit promise is, if you are disciplined enough, devout enough, virtuous enough, you can transcend the human condition. You can stop slipping. The Nahua said, no. No one walks the slippery earth without losing their footing. Not the wise, not the king, not the priest. The earth is slick. That is what the earth is. And to expect otherwise is not virtue. It is a failure to understand reality. A father, in one of the Nezahualcoyotl, the ancient words of instruction, said this to his son. On earth we travel. We live along a mountain peak. Over here there is an abyss. Over there is an abyss. That is the human situation in the Nahua imagination. Not a wide field, a ridge, two sides, and you fall off both. Listen to what this does. If you accept this picture, really accept it, something shifts in how you think about your own life and the lives of the people around you. The goal of life is not to become someone who never falls. That is the impossible goal, and chasing it will only make you a hypocrite or break you with shame. The goal of life is to become someone who walks the ridge as well as it can be walked, with balance, with care, with humility, with awareness that the next step might be the step that slips. That goal, that art of careful walking, has a name. In Nahuatl, it is Neltiliztli, and it is one of the most surprising ideas in world philosophy. Neltiliztli is usually translated as truth. That translation is correct, but it hides everything interesting. Because if you ask a Tlamatinime, a Nahua philosopher, what makes something true, you will not get the answer most Western philosophers would give. Most Western philosophy says, a belief is true if it corresponds to reality. You say, the sky is blue. If the sky is in fact blue, your statement is true. Truth is a matching, a correspondence between word and world. The Nahua had a different concept entirely. For the Tlamatinime, Neltiliztli, truth, meant something more like well-rootedness. Something true was something that was deeply, firmly rooted, anchored, stable in the storm, the opposite of slippery. You can hear the connection to everything we have just discussed. If the earth is slippery, if life is unstable, then what makes something real, what makes it true, what makes it good, is precisely the quality of being well-rooted enough to withstand that instability. Truth in this philosophy is not about description. It is about endurance. A true person is a rooted person. A true song is a rooted song. A true life is a rooted life. Scholars have linked the word Neltiliztli to Nezahualcoyotl, the Nahuatl word for root, though the precise morphology is debated. The conceptual link, however, runs all through the poetry. To be true is to have roots. This idea reshapes ethics from the ground up. Goodness is not perfection. Goodness is rootedness. The good life, the life worth living, is not the life in which you avoid every fall. It is the life in which, when you fall, your roots hold. You do not slide off the mountain. Think about what this means for how you treat other people. If you accept that the earth is slippery and that everyone is going to slip on it eventually, then the moral failures of the people around you stop looking like betrayals of some achievable perfection. They look like what they are: human beings losing their footing on slippery ground. Compassion is no longer optional. It is no longer a special generosity you extend to lesser souls. It is the natural posture of someone who knows what the terrain is like because they have slipped on it themselves. And think about what this means for how you treat yourself. The voice in your head that says, you should never have done that. You should never have felt that. You should be better than this. That voice is, in the Nahua view, not telling the truth. That voice does not understand the slippery earth. The truthful voice, the one in tune with reality, says, of course you slipped. Everyone slips. The question is whether you can stay rooted enough to keep walking. This is not moral laxity. This is not anything goes. The Nahua had extremely strict moral codes of moderation, balance, careful conduct, ritual obligation. They knew exactly how dangerous excess was, exactly how easily a life could go wrong. They were not soft. But they refused the cruel idea that a human being could or should be perfect. And they replaced perfection, that impossible standard, with rootedness, with balance, with the art of careful walking on dangerous ground. There is one Nahua thinker, perhaps the most famous of all, who spent his life turning these ideas into poetry. His name was Nezahualcoyotl. And to meet him is to meet what this philosophy looks like when a single human being tries to live it. Nezahualcoyotl ruled the city-state of Texcoco from 1431 until his death in 1472. He was a king. He was an engineer who designed the great dike that protected Tenochtitlan from flooding. He was a lawgiver who codified one of the most sophisticated legal systems of pre-Columbian America. He was also a poet. And the poems that have come down under his name are some of the most beautiful and most philosophically loaded that survive from the entire Nahua world. A note of honesty. Scholars debate how much of this verse is authentically his, since much was written down generations after his death. But the ideas are unmistakably Nahua. Here is a fragment, translated by Leon Portilla. Is it true that one really lives on the earth? Not forever on earth, only a little while here. Though it be jade, it falls apart. Though it be gold, it wears away. Though it be Quetzal plumage, it is torn asunder. Not forever on this earth, only a little while here. Sit with that. Listen to what he is doing. Jade, gold, the feathers of the Quetzal bird, which were, to the Nahua, the most precious substance imaginable. Green and gold feathers worth more than gold itself. Nezahualcoyotl names the three things his civilization considered most permanent, the most lasting, the hardest, the most enduring, the most beautiful. And then he tells you, one by one, that all three of them break. Jade falls apart. Gold wears away. Quetzal plumage is torn. There is nothing on this earth, nothing that lasts. This is not despair. This is Neltiliztli. This is rooted truth about what kind of place we live in. Nezahualcoyotl is not whining about mortality. He is seeing mortality. He is reporting, with the steadiness of a philosopher, the fact that we live in a world where the most precious things crumble. And then, in other poems, he asks the further question, if everything beautiful breaks, if everything we love is fleeting, then what is the right way to respond? What does a wise person do with this knowledge? His answer, woven through the poetry, has two parts. First, enjoy the flowers and the song while they are here. Beauty is real even though it is fleeting. In fact, beauty may be more real because it is fleeting. The Nahua had a famous phrase, in Xochitl in Cuicatl, the flower and the song, which referred to poetry, art, and the brief, blooming beauty of life. To live well is to honor the flower and the song, to make beauty, knowing it will not last, to sing, knowing the song will end. And second, root yourself. If everything around you is breaking, the answer is not to deny it. The answer is to grow roots deep enough to hold while the breaking goes on. To live in such a way that when the jade falls apart, you do not fall apart with it, because your sense of who you are was never built on the jade in the first place. Nezahualcoyotl, the king who built one of the greatest cities of his age, the man who held in his hands more jade and gold and Quetzal feathers than almost anyone alive, was the same man who wrote that none of it would last. And he wrote it not in horror, but in something closer to peace. That is what this philosophy looks like when a person actually lives it. I want to be honest with you about the hard parts, because no philosophy worth taking seriously is a philosophy without difficulties. First, the methodological problem. Everything I have just told you was reconstructed from fragments. The Spanish burned most of it. The surviving sources were filtered through friars who, however careful some of them were, did not share the Nahua worldview and were trying ultimately to convert the people whose words they were recording. We are working with broken mirrors. There is real, ongoing scholarly debate about how confident any of these readings can be. When I tell you that Teotl is a single sacred energy underlying all of reality, I am giving you Matthey's interpretation, which is influential, but which other scholars have challenged. Some argue it imports a too modern, too Western notion of impersonal energy back into a tradition that was probably more populated, more personal, more God-filled than Maffei's reading suggests. The truth is, we do not have the original Tlamatinime on hand to settle the dispute. We have what survives, and we have our best careful guesses. Second, the ethical complexity. Aztec civilization, like all civilizations, contained things modern viewers find deeply troubling. Most famously, human sacrifice, practiced as a central religious institution. We did not focus on it today because our subject is the philosophical tradition, and human sacrifice belongs primarily to the religious ritual sphere, with its own complicated logic about cosmic debt and the maintenance of the sun. But it would be dishonest to pretend it isn't there. A civilization that produced Nezahualcoyotl's poetry also produced the great temples at the heart of Tenochtitlan, where blood ran on the steps. Both of these things are true. Holding both at once is part of taking the civilization seriously, rather than reducing it to either monsters or mystics. Third, the danger of romanticism. There is a temptation, especially when a civilization has been the victim of conquest and destruction, to idealize it, to flatten its complexity, to make its philosophy into a tidy alternative to whatever we are tired of in the modern West. I want to resist that. The Nahua were neither nobler nor crueler than other peoples of their era. They were thinkers, and the thinking they did is worth our serious attention. Not because they were saints, but because they were philosophers, and good ones. With those honest caveats in mind, let us ask the question this video has been building toward. What does any of this have to do with us? We live in a culture that has, by and large, decided to bet against the slippery earth. We tell ourselves, through advertising, through self-help, through technology, through politics, that the right combination of effort, optimization, and tools will produce a life without falls. The right diet, the right routine, the right relationship, the right career, the right brain. And if you fall, if you fail, if you grieve, if you slip, the implicit message is that you have done something wrong, that someone, somewhere with the right algorithm is not slipping, that the slippage is a personal failure rather than a feature of the terrain. The Tlamatinime would have looked at this and shaken their heads. The terrain is the terrain. The earth is slippery. It has always been slippery. It will always be slippery. The people who tell you otherwise are selling you something. And the shame you carry when you slip is not the response of a wise person. It is the response of someone who has not yet understood where they are walking. The Nahua had 3 quiet pieces of advice, woven through their poetry, their Huehuetlatoli, their entire ethical tradition, that I think speak with strange directness to us right now. The first is, expect the slip. Build your life on the assumption that you and the people you love will lose your footing. Not occasionally, often. The wise life is not the life that avoids failure. It is the life that has made room for failure in advance and built compassion toward self and others into its foundations. The second is grow roots. Spend your life developing the kind of inner depth that holds when the surface fails. For the Nahua, this meant moderation, balance, careful study, attention to ritual, fidelity to community. For you, it may look different, but the underlying instruction is the same. Do not build your sense of who you are on the jade and the gold and the quetzal feathers. Those wear away. Build it on something that has roots. And the third is, honor the flower and the song. While you are here, for the little while you are here, make beauty. Make it knowing it will not last. Sing the song knowing it will end. The temporariness does not diminish the beauty. According to Nezahualcoyotl, the temporariness is part of what makes the beauty real. The slippery earth is a hard idea, but it is also, strangely, a gentle one. It says, you are not weak because you slip. You are human, and you live on the surface of a difficult world. The shame is not the slipping. The shame, if there is any, is in pretending that you do not slip, or in despising the people around you for slipping when you yourself have slipped 100 times before. A father 500 years ago told his son, on earth we travel. We live along a mountain peak. Over here there is an abyss. Over there is an abyss. He was not trying to frighten his son. He was trying to prepare him. He was saying, I know where we are. I know the shape of this place. Now you know too. Walk carefully and help the people walking near you, because they are walking the same ridge you are. The civilization that produced these ideas was destroyed. Their books were burned. Their cities were leveled. Their language was suppressed for centuries. By every external measure, they lost. But their philosophy survived, in fragments. In the Teotl recorded by the friars who came to convert them, in the codices that escaped the fires, in the songs of Nezahualcoyotl, copied and copied again until they reached us, in the patient work of modern scholars, Leon Portilla, Maffei, Burckhardt, and others, who refused to dismiss this thinking as mere myth. And so the Tlamatinime are still speaking, across 5 centuries, across a vanished language, across the silence imposed by conquest. They are still telling us what they observed, watching their own lives unfold on the surface of a difficult world. The earth is slippery. You will fall. Live rootedly anyway. Honor the flower and the song. That is the answer they gave to the oldest question there is. It is not the only good answer, but it is one of the most honest. And in a time that has perhaps forgotten the slippery earth, it may be the answer we most need to hear. Thank you for walking with me. Take care on the ridge.